Let's take a look back into arguably the best generation ever and the best console redemption art of all time.
The new Sony PlayStation 3 sold out in just hours this weekend in Japan. It goes on sale here this week.
It's being called a security breach of staggering proportions. Hackers broke into its PlayStation network.
PlayStation.
March 2001, a year after the PlayStation 2 launched, Sony, IBM, and Toshiba began a joint venture to develop the cell broadband engine that would eventually become the processor of the PlayStation 3. Development of Cell took place over a 5-year period at the Design Center in Austin, Texas, under the collaborative name STI. Each company had their own interests. Sony, the PlayStation 3, but Toshiba and IBM, the chip had broader application. Scientific and medical computing, servers, TVs, and more. Sony went public with Cell during their 2004 E3 press conference, where their chief technology officer at the time revealed some of its capabilities.
Our objective is to provide supercomputing for various digital entertainment applications. Modeling, rendering, physics simulation are some of the well-known techniques. So everyone please look forward to what's waiting for you in the very near future.
No direct mention of PlayStation 3 was made at this event. By 2005, close to the end of Cell's development, it was clear how much Sony was invested into Cell, with Ken Kutaragi, Sony Computer Entertainment president and CEO at the time, investing $400 million into its development. E3 2005 is where the PlayStation 3 would officially be unveiled, with a nearly 2-hour-long press conference that would cover the system's capabilities, show pre-rendered trailers, tech demos, its specifications, and a message that this will be a powerful piece of consumer hardware. PlayStation 3 will be backwards compatible with PS1 and PS2 games, feature 6 USB ports, 2 HDMI ports, 3 Ethernet ports, with the GPU made in collaboration with NVIDIA being called RSX, which stood for Reality Synthesizer. The conference ended showing the design of the PlayStation 3 and announcing it was coming spring 2006. The font used, Mata, for the console was the same font used in the Spider-Man movies, also developed by Sony, with a few design changes to the typeface. This was insisted by Ken Kutaragi, and this would be the PlayStation 3 logo from 2006 all the way until 2009. Later on the show floor, the controller was revealed, which looked radically different to the previous iterations of the DualShock. Despite the Xbox releasing a year earlier, Sony doesn't even consider Microsoft to be a threat. Shortly after the conference, in an interview with Ken Kutaragi, he said that beating us for a short moment is like accidentally winning a point from a Shihan, and Microsoft is still not a black belt. Ken hinted that the PlayStation 3 might be expensive with the quote, "We want consumers to think to themselves, I will work more hours to buy one. We want people to feel that way, irrespective of anything else." In PlayStation's 2006 E3 press conference, we get a final look at the system and games lineup before launch. Both the games and the system have both been scaled back. The system has less Ethernet, USB, and HDMI ports than previously promised, and the controller design is now more in line with previous DualShock controllers of the past. Games that were shown last year were pre-rendered trailers were now being shown running on the actual system, and Metal Gear Solid 4, Gran Turismo HD, Resistance Fall of Man, Final Fantasy 13 were all shown to be coming to the console. The system was revealed to have been delayed from its spring release date, now releasing on the 17th of November 2006, and costing $500 USD for the 20GB model without Wi-Fi and $600 for the 60GB model with Wi-Fi. Shuhei Yoshida recalls this price reveal to be horrifying, and this would kill a lot of the hype behind the system at the time. Whilst the system was already expensive to the consumers, Sony was still taking over a $200 loss on each system sold at the time. However, Ken would double down on the price of the system with statements such as, "It's probably too cheap. If you can have an amazing experience, we believe price is not a problem." He would also say, "If you consider the PlayStation 3 a toy, then yes, it's an expensive toy. However, it's more than a toy. It's a PlayStation 3, and it's the only PlayStation 3. I hope that those who understand this will gladly purchase it." There was a lot at stake at PlayStation, spending $400 million on Cell, launching a year after Xbox, going with Blu-ray over HD DVD, and selling consoles at such a large loss. Yet Ken Kutaragi was going into this with a high level of confidence after winning the past 2 console generations. The system being his pride and joy, a passion project he spent years working on, with PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 just being the building blocks to get to this point. Employees who who worked with him described him as a fierce visionary who would at times get emotional for better or for worse. With PlayStation 3, he was concerned with making it the main and only entertainment system you would need, pushing graphical fidelity to its limits. This potentially could have been due to the PlayStation 3 being his send-off. Former chairman Kaz Hirai recalls Ken working on PlayStation 2 immediately after PlayStation 1 launched, and that he did the same with PlayStation 3, starting development on it right after PlayStation 2 launched. However, when asked about PlayStation 4 before PlayStation 3 launched, he said PlayStation 4 is not my responsibility. For someone who was seen to be potentially running the whole company one day, this response seemed odd, but for Ken Kutaragi, he knew for one reason or another the PlayStation 3 was his goodbye. November 2006, the PlayStation 3 would launch in Japan and North America, and manufacturing delays would cause an extreme shortage of consoles, delaying the Europe release to March 2007. North America would see multiple violent crimes drawing the lines for the system, including stampedes and shootings.
I've been here since 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's so many people here cutting the damn line, and it's affecting me personally and all my homeboys right here. It's pissing me off.
The next morning, this Walmart in Connecticut was a crime scene after gunmen trying to rob people in line shot a 21-year-old for refusing to hand over his cash. The PS3 is in tight supply and has only been released in Japan, the US, and Hong Kong.
I need the first 34 individuals to line up.
The scarcity of the console meant that people would buy it only to resell it and scalp it on eBay.
Money, because I'm a hustler on eBay. I'm not keeping it. I'm just not even going to open up the box. Selling it right once I get it.
One bidder in Britain paid almost $20,000 for his console. The PS3 won't hit shops there or in Australia until March next year.
Notable games at launch included Blast Factor, a Blue Point Games original before they would go on to only make remasters and remakes, Call of Duty 3, Madden NFL 07, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, MotorStorm, NBA 2K7, Need for Speed Carbon, Resistance Fall of Man by Insomniac, and Ridge Racer 7. Early impressions were not positive. The launch lineup was disappointing to many, and the online features at the time were lackluster for a system that cost upwards of $600. Shortly after release, on November 30th, Ken Kutaragi is replaced by Kaz Hirai as president of Sony Computer Entertainment, meaning that Ken no longer ran the day-to-day operations. A year later, in April 2007, he stepped down and became an honorary chairman. Whilst many believe him to have stepped down due to the PlayStation 3's poor performance, it is lesser known that he already had plans on leaving before the launch of the system. Whether this was due to him wanting to step down or due to him being pushed out due to hostile leadership and failures with the PlayStation 3 is still unknown. By mid-2007, developers were still struggling to learn and develop for this new architecture. However, this was intentional. Sony wanted to box out the competition. Yes, Cell was complicated, but this was supposed to accomplish two things. It was supposed to be more powerful, meaning better performance and better looking games, but it was also supposed to make developers be forced to learn Cell. With the PlayStation name and brand, they thought they would be the market leaders, meaning that Xbox would be an afterthought where games would look worse and perform worse. But instead the opposite happened. Xbox launched first, giving them a head start to both consumers and developers. Plus it was a cheaper system at the time that had sold more, meaning PlayStation 3 being expensive for the consumers with less sales and difficult to develop for, made it an afterthought instead. This resulted in worse performing and worse looking games for the system coming from third-party developers. However, the Cell processor was being put to use for other applications it was developed for, servers, TVs, and even clustering together PlayStation 3s. Although other Sony devices were supposed to use Cell, PlayStation 3 would end up being the only product that utilized it. In 2008, Mark Cerny would come in to start development on the PlayStation 4. E3 2009, both Microsoft and PlayStation would reveal motion control peripherals, Xbox the Kinect and PlayStation the Move controller. By now, it's the middle of the generation and Xbox still has the lead. Gamescom 2009, PlayStation decided to fire back, releasing an all-new, cheaper and slimmer model of the PlayStation 3, costing only $300. This is when they would redesign the logo from the previous Spider-Man Mata font, on top of an all-new marketing campaign by Kevin Butler.
Dear PlayStation, I got a tip that you were making the PS3 $299. Confirm or deny?
$299? Bernie, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. Otherwise, I'd be a Nigerian millionaire by now.
In their earnings report, ending October 2009, they reported a loss of $654 million for their games and service division, totaling a $4.7 billion loss since the console's launch. PlayStation Move launched that same year, and the list of exclusive games for the system would continue to release. Around the same time, IBM announced developments for Cell were basically over. In 2010, there were multiple quality games. However, this is the same year PlayStation would remove Linux support for the system, resulting in clusters no longer being feasible. This resulted in a lawsuit that they lost for advertising a feature and then removing it. With these struggles aside, the sales gap was closing and they were finally gaining their footing. What was once an overpriced system that barely had any games and poor quality ports was now an affordable system, receiving a steady stream of quality exclusive games. Not only that, but developers now had multiple years of development for Cell under their belt, meaning that ports were now more in line with their 360 counterpart. Not to mention, the Xbox 360 Red Ring of Death caused people to abandon the platform. In 2011, the exclusive first-party games were now starting to show an increase in graphical fidelity, fully taking advantage of the Cell processor. However, this same year, PlayStation would receive another devastating blow. The PlayStation Network would be hacked, causing an outage, keeping the service down for 23 days whilst investigating the cause and rebuilding the network. The personal data of about 100 million account holders was compromised, with credit card information believed to be leaked also. This would cost an estimated $170 million, with $230 million fine from the UK for breaching the Data Protection Act. April 1st, 2012, Kutaragi would be promoted to president and CEO of Sony, now leading the entire company after taking over Ken Kutaragi's previous role. This was most likely due to him making all the right moves to put PlayStation 3 back on the right track. Before the end of the generation, they would release another reiteration of the PlayStation 3, even slimmer and cheaper than before. January 2013, it was reported that PlayStation had more worldwide shipments than the 360, and a month later, they would reveal the PlayStation 4. By May, PlayStation officially reported PlayStation 3 had surpassed the 360 in sales, and in June 2013, they would close out the generation with critically acclaimed blockbuster The Last of Us, developed by Naughty Dog, winning multiple Game of the Year awards. So it beat the competition, but at what cost? When everything is all said and done, the PlayStation had one of the best comebacks in gaming of all time, with everything coming together at the end, with an incredible library of exclusive games, trophy support, and better online infrastructure. Although there were a few blunders like the PSN outage, the removal of Linux, and poor ports due to the Cell processor not being widely adopted like they had wanted it to be. By the end of the generation, we had a glimpse of what the Cell processor was truly capable of, with developers like Naughty Dog fully taking advantage of it. If PlayStation 5 had hit their initial 2005 release date, or even simply got development kits for the system out to developers before Xbox did, then Cell could have been the standard, changing the entire outcome of the generation, with devs leading on Cell and porting to 360. Ken Kutaragi was an innovative, passionate leader that wanted to create the best all-in-one entertainment system, putting aside how much it costs Sony, developers, or the consumers. Many see him as a visionary for his contributions to the video game industry, such as Jack Tretton. For whatever reason, the PlayStation 3 was his swan song that almost cost Sony the entire gaming division. This was a lot of people's introduction to gaming and their first console. If it wasn't their first system, then a lot of people were on this generation during their teen years, where they could more so experiment with what they liked and their own taste. Meaning for a lot of people, this is their favorite generation of all time.